Hi everyone. Today we're going to talk about how all of the features that we've been creating in the last few months tie in really nicely. Absolutely amazing workflow. That's what we're really excited to show you. All right, Pankil, I think we're ready to kick it off.
All right. Sounds good, guys. So thank you all for being here. What I want to talk about is what is the new norms of creating content that will be authoritative and will consistently bring value to your websites in long run and keep building on that authority. So I wanted to start with talking about topical authority. For many of you, this might be nuanced and understanding like keyword research can be difficult sometimes for many of you. So I wanted to start with the topical authority, and let's get started with this. Share screen, window, and there we go. All right. So, how to build topical authority, right? Let's just quickly start with Outranking. We are an SEO content strategy platform now that helps you manage the entire content lifecycle from finding the right content to go after, creating the content, creating those briefs, tracking the content that you put out, and optimizing it for better ranking. So the entire lifecycle is managed on Outranking. And let's get right into what is topical authority. So topical authority means your website's perceived authority by search engines on a specific topic, right? So how much information you have on a particular topic on your website uh, increases your likelihood to be favored in search engine. This is proven tactic that many websites and many niche websites absolutely use in order to build authority and compete with some bigger websites, right? So I mean, this is a very general term and there's a lot of things that go into understanding how do you really acquire this and how do you really strategically execute topics that add on to this topical authority and just make your website a killer going further. So this is what it quickly looks like, and I took this image from HubSpot straight away, so and this best describes it. You have small clusters of content, so you have one post and you have many surrounding supporting posts to it, and that is one cluster, right? So you are trying to build an authority in that particular cluster. For example, it's like really breaking it down. So what we'll focus on today is understanding how you can build out one of these circles that you see and the small circles around it, cluster, and how you can build upon that and then expand into some of the other clusters and see similar results and improved rankings. But this is all very strategic, right? So this just does not happen by randomly curating topics that have one word in common and you just kind of put a silo together and execute upon that. That's not what we're talking about. It's a little more complicated than that. So benefits of having strategy for a topical authority, like you can easily outrank bigger websites. Chances of your web, there's higher chances that many other websites would want to link to you because you have tons and tons of authoritative material on a specific topic. It just qualifies you to be an expert, right? And people want to link to expert. It helps create a systematic flow of internal links and authority for better ranking. And this is a major aspect of what topical authority is and how you can pass the authority of one page to the other. Will not cover this particular section in this presentation. I have a planned presentation for this where we'll discuss how you can actually add internal links and compound upon this topical. Lesser affected by search algorithm updates, right? The reason they are lesser affected is because they are authority. Unless you're doing something terribly wrong, your technical is off the track, like you're not following all the right on page elements and somehow got by up till now and an algorithm hits and your sites start losing ranking. But it will not happen because of content. It will not happen because your website lacks the depth, right? And this is where Google is increasingly trying to focus on because they want to serve the best content, and best content often lies with websites that repeatedly write about that and know everything about a specific topic. It helps establish a broad content strategy alignment. So if you know exactly what is the part of your cluster and what is your topical authority going to look like if you execute so and so and so topics, it helps you establish the broader alignment, right? So you can keep executing on strategy, know exactly which keyword to go after first, second, third, fourth, fifth, so that you can keep consistently bringing value and do things that will actually help you right now, and increase the traffic right now, instead of just suggesting something ridiculous with large volume and highly competitive keywords and competitors in search, and it's just impossible to outrank them. You're not there yet, right? So we'll talk about that as well in this particular presentation. And it also keeps you focused on business objectives, right? Like, so if it is to elevate some of your services or product pages, you would kind of have a very good understanding of what content I should be creating to support those pages and send traffic to those pages to convert them into to convert more leads, right? So more traffic, more qualified traffic. They're visiting a page, they have a problem, and you're solving them with this particular topic in your cluster, and they're coming to your service and product page after that. So there's many benefits of topic authority, and this is how everyone should be creating content if you're starting out, or if you already have a website and you kind of want to find out now where's your position in all of these and work through it. But you need to build a strategy around topical authority. Okay, so step one, right? Like, how do you really build topic authority? So, like, I am going to show this process for some complicated keywords, right? And some keywords that we are targeting, and some real examples of what this like entire process entails. So step one, you'd start with a very broad query. So I listed out three examples. One is cat litter. For more comprehensive, research, start with litter. If you are like, there could be litter boxes for, some different types of animals, right? So if that is a space that you're serving, you can start there. But if it is specific to cat litter, which is more niche, you can start with cat litter, right? Like, that's a broad term that you want to use. If it was a content brief, if you are selling a content brief creation tool like Outranking, would start with content brief, right? If you want to be a little more specific, you can be SEO content brief, and now you'll have more specific terms to building authority in the SEO content brief space, right? And there might be many things. We're just not talking about those three words in the query. You'll be surprised to find so many things around content brief that supports content brief that you would have essentially missed out with the regular keyword research. So this is an essential step. Like, you just kind of find out what your main objective is, what you're really selling, or what you want to build your authority in. And the third example is a little technical: GraphQL as a service. Like, you're a cloud-based GraphQL service, right? And that's the space that you're serving, and people would have questions related to clouds and stuff like that you would want to be answer around those broad terms. Step two. So now the step two is like, you break it down, and there's many tools that can do this, right? Like extract NLP terms and give you subtopics. Some are great, some are okay, some are 80% there, some are 90% there. The problem is that you are not going to get 100% everything everywhere. If you go for 100%, there will be many outliers. If you don't go for 100%, you might miss out certain things, right? So just find the right balance. But the point is, when you're starting to build authority, you have sufficient amount of topics that you can kind of create supporting pillar. I mean, supporting pages to support that pillar page, or your actual main selling page. Okay, so for content brief, as an example, I broke it down, and you can understand like how some of these things relate to content brief, then it would relate to a content brief software, right? That's the main agenda behind it. So what I would do is I would create a power page around content brief, but then I would have content around keyword research tool, content marketing teams, content creation process, and all of that, targeting certain other related keywords, where then like they're very long tail. They should be easily be able to you should be able to rank for them if you target the right ones. And if you do that, you can kind of build your authority in that space and keep supporting content brief that can then keep supporting your continuous lead flow to that particular page that you want the traffic to go to, right? Or if your objective is selling ads, or if your objective is selling affiliate products, you want them to go through as much content on your website as possible. And if you execute this content strategically like this, then everything becomes easier, not only for you, but for your users as well. I took a couple of examples here. So I took word count over here, and oftentimes a content brief would have a word count, so people would have questions around it. So if I was to write something around word count, then I can suggest people that, hey, it's one of the essential things that you can include in your content brief. in your content brief. You should include in your content brief. And if you're trying to create a content brief, here's another article that talks about what content brief is. Or you can send them somewhere else and say, you know, how to actually create a content brief. Like, depends on your content structure, but that's the entire process and the mindset around this particular strategy. So I took two examples over here, and what you are essentially doing now is you're taking the combination of content brief and the word count and doing as many iterations as you can to find all semantically related or, you know, close match keywords. So mentioning is just this is I'm stressing this because it's important to find the semantically related keywords as well as the related keywords. Most times when you enter a keyword like topical authority in Ahrefs or SEMrush, right, like you can do that even right now, you would find long tail keywords which have topical authority, but it will not show keywords like perceived authority, which is sort of very close to what topical authority means, at least to the search engines. So you want to be targeting those terms, or you want to be writing around those terms, and sometimes they could have like totally different meaning when the entire query lines up. And that is why it's important to do this iterations and find out all the kinds of content that you can actually create around a particular subtopic that we pulled out from that NLP extraction, right? So this is what that should a roundabout look like. And if you see some examples here, right, a word count, a content brief template word, it's not really a word count, but people are looking for templates in Word, right? Like you could have a topic, you can curate all this amazing templates in Word that have content brief and show a showcase. And you can also say, hey, by the way, if you're looking for a tool that, you know, does this, then go here. And that should be your strategy, right? Table of content, right? Like, so it's extremely long tail keywords that I've mentioned over here, like how to make a good table of content, examples of table of content outline, right? Like you could either target them individually if they're extremely long tail, or you can create even a more comprehensive post that has all of these three topics in it, right? So you have a multi-keyword document, an outranking kind of thing, and you talk about all of these three things in one post and try to make sense of it all. But again, depending on the caliber and how many, what's your website's perceived authority right now, you should be targeting some of this keywords, right? Like if I was just starting out my website, then I need to literally go after the lowest possible keyword difficulty keywords that nobody wants to target. So once you have this list of keywords that you want to go after, what you want to do is there's two possibilities at this point. You either are just starting out and you need your new strategy. In that case, like you can totally miss step 4. Like you don't need step 4. If your site is extremely small, you've just written like 5, 10, 15 blog posts, don't even worry about step 4 at this particular point, because that's also time consuming and it requires understanding of lots of data. So if you find now what you need to do is go into your search console data if you have some traffic on your website, and extract, right, the website, the keyword that they're ranking, I mean the URL, the keyword that they're ranking for, their click-through rate, impressions and positions, and kind of identify opportunities. Like, are some of these keywords part of my strategy or not? If they are, then I've already done some work around them. So whether it makes sense for me to create new documents around it, or add them to my content writing strategy, or just add it up for optimization so I can improve it later. And this is why you really need this data. But you also need this data for something else, which is step 5. So if you do this step 5, then you can like literally nail the game of SEO. But this requires some figuring out. So find your true potential to rank and use a compound SEO strategy to choose keywords. What is a compound SEO strategy? And you can check up, right? Like a Kind Roof and a few other SEO geniuses have talked about this. So it's going after keywords that Google will kind of easily give you ranking for based on your current perceived authority, right? And what is difficult is when you look at your search console data and you have this clusters and clusters and keywords of, you know, content and data. How do you figure out a common trend that supports that claim that your website can rank for this kind of keywords very easily? So what we like, you can handpick them and it's just still a guessing part. But if you look at these two examples, tone in literature examples and copywriting company, and check the URLs, tone of writing complete guide, versus 14 types of copywriting, right? Like, what is common? None of these keywords are being targeted in the URL, right? Like, so I kind of have an idea that I'm ranking for terms with tones, either literature, example, maybe copywriting, company. Like, what is that common trend in your content? If you know that common trend from your content where something is ranking on your website, even if you're not targeting very easily, you kind of know a trend in what you should, where you should be going. So this is what I laid out over here. Like, one is at 73rd position, and the first one is at 7th position, and I'm not even bothered like targeting this keyword. So it requires a lot of time and figuring out and putting things in place to make sense of it all. The next step is, like, once you have this figured out, you kind of want to pick the keywords that you want to go after. And this becomes fairly easy if you have this mapping or some sort of tool that does that. But like, this is a manual process, right? Like, but this is what a genius strategy would look like. Like, I know I can rank for things, with things around SEO, blog post, or content SEO and outlines, right? Like, and this is so and so keyword difficulty I can easily rank for. But if common trend, and if you can pinpoint that common trend to the word count and table of content, now you have something that is out of like ordinary, right? Like research. You can go and write those keywords and rank for it super easily. And then once you start ranking for those keywords, if you can still tap into your search console data and take updated feedback to understand where your perceived authority is now and move up the chain eventually to keep building upon that authority, you can still even do that, right? But even to start with, for smaller websites, taking this approach can start establishing your website as an authority in the space. Okay, so last step, collect the final list of all the topics that you want to go after and execute. I'd stop right here. I'll show a live demonstration of how you can actually do all of these things that you just described in Strategist, and in a very systematic way that will reduce like tons and tons of guessing work out, and it will do all of this figuring out using AI, right? Like, it'll learn from what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong, and suggest a strategy based on that. So I'm gonna have to share a different screen. So I gave you guys an example of content brief, right? And that's exactly what we're going to do here. So I created a project, and we create a new project, right? This is just a project name. You can add the focus term that you want to like build topical authority in, and then you can add your sitemap. So the reason why we're collecting sitemap is to sort of be able to figure out like if you're really targeting that keyword in any of your content pieces, and whether it is ranking anywhere, that comes secondary. But it's not accurate at all, because we are making combinations of terms in order to predict what your coverage is, like what sort of things you're covering on your website yet. So you can skip this if you don't have a website, if you're working for a client and you're just building out a strategy, you don't really need this, you can skip this part. But it will help you identify topics on top of things that you might be even ranking for. So it just enriches the data. So more information you have, the more enrichment you can get. Actions project. Again, this is not compulsory to include, but this is the AI engine that listens into your search console data and suggests you this feedback that is totally automated. It's extensive effort in understanding and repeatedly processing data to find a common trend. So you can add that, or you can skip it if your website is still very small, right? Like, and you're still building out your authority, a few topics at a time. You can totally skip this and go to the next step. So we'll just go back, and I will show you content brief. So when I click on content brief, and this is the project that we've just created, what it does is it's going to pull out all the information from NLP terms. So all these terms that you see over here are all NLP terms, right? So that's the first process that we want to do, and you have that data. And this is listening into about 30 to 50 topics. So give it some time to kind of really go through this. If you keep clicking on the project, right, it'll open and it'll keep loading data, but it's still processing more data in the back end. So give it some time and come back to it. And what it will do is that if you've added all the parameters, then it will build out the coverage. But if you have not added sitemap and actions, or either or, right, it will not be able to build the coverage. So you can skip that part and just go on with the research and finishing it up. But let's go and look at some of these things, right? So these are the total amount of unique subtopics that we found, and there's possibility that you might have 10 or 5 to 10% outliers. So you're going to have to vet them out as you build out your authority, but you can start focusing on things which are more important now versus the later by only exploring those clusters. Okay, this is the coverage strengths of the product of your project. So I'm trying to build topical authority in content brief, and it's telling me that there is 8,011 places that I could potentially be at, but I am at 192, right? So how can I actually improve that going further so that I get more comprehensive coverage and I can establish more authority, right? Like this is also an extensive steps to calculate all of these things based on the information that you're provided, and understand and bring out this insight. So that's that. Now, when you first land, you are not going to see topical find clusters, right? Like there's going to be explore clusters. You can explore, and you should explore the ones that really matter to you, and not just explore everything altogether. This is not a keyword research tool, or this is not a topic extraction tool at all. So the data is processed on every explore cluster. We go and we find 20, 30 pages relevant to each of these terms, and try to extract information from all of those pages related to what terms they're ranking for, what related terms they're ranking for, and you can understand the amount of processing that happens on each of these processing clusters. So we will see that as soon as I click on some of these things, we'll get more details. But you're mapping out. This is the first part, right? Like this is the first step that I showed in the slides, where you're mapping out this entire thing. And once you have mapped out, you can start picking on things that will matter the most to you, right? So I see that I have some coverage, and if that is something that I'm really targeting, I would go ahead and find that, click on explore, right? A content creation process has given me some coverage, so I could click and find information related to that. So now this is the step 2, where I'm actually going and finding all the relevant keywords and all semantically related terms. Semantically related is important because you could have definition, you could have short forms that you are trying to target, right? And things like that. You want to be automatically able to figure out what is the most relevant topic that you can write, and not have to do guesswork of whether I'm targeting a dog, right? Like it's obvious that it could be a puppy, it could be writing about canine. They all mean, sort of the same thing. How accurate is your process of identifying this sort of terms and grouping them, so you don't miss out on the important details that can add easily upon your topical authority. So if you click on it, it automatically extracts all of those information. And for people on higher tier who do this very frequently and want to expedite and just go about extracting all the topic at once, you can click on this, check all, and explore. I do not recommend this because this consumes credit. And the last thing that we want to recommend is you just blindly go ahead and explore clusters. So make sure that you vet out the things that you don't want to include before you do that. You can also multi-check, right, and then explore at the same time to save some time, but carefully vet it out. So once you click on these things, right, like the content idea, content development brief. So let's look at this. This is the bigger, broader keyword category term. So if I was creating a pillar page, this is where I'd want to start targeting my majority of the content, because I know that I am going to create a pillar page about content brief, which will then have so many other supporting pages to it. So this is where that would be. But let's look at some of the other things which we rank for. So content length, right? Let's look at this. And you don't have to pick everything out of this. You can carefully pick what you really want out of it. And that is why you can see that out of this, so many content pieces that I saw over here, I only picked 3 or 4 things that I wanted to add to my strap. So it is carefully vetting out the topics that you can easily rank for, and then compound upon it later once you have built authority for that particular keyword size potential and all of that combined together with your perceived authority. So okay, all right, now let's look at some other controls that will allow you to do a certain other things. Okay, so we are in content marketing strategy. And what it's suggesting is that, a strategy could also be influencer marketing, and that could need a content brief, right? So influencer marketing content brief. And if you have a web page around content marketing strategy as a pillar page, you can also create a silo and link it from there. But if you don't, right, you can still start talking about influencer marketing content brief and what they look like, and eventually tie it into your content brief or tie it into your content marketing strategy pillar page. But if this is not something that matters to you right now, you can totally ignore that. So now let's look at this, right? So it opened up, and there are a few colors that you will see for this particular thing. So this green is what it's telling me that if I still have less coverage, I have a long way to go. I've just started entering this particular space. This keyword would be relatively easy for me to rank for. It's not like blindly looking at this numbers. Okay, so don't just go back on like volume and CPC and put difficulty. It's not at all looking at that data. What it's really looking at is your search console data and identifying some trends around content brief and suggesting you where you should really start right now. And it's those are the green topics that you would essentially see. So it's up to you if you want to really sort those through, or if you want to select your own topics. But we suggest you use that compounding strategy if you're building out. As your website grows in authority, as your search console data grows in authority, as your strategy becomes stronger, as your coverage increases, you will see the potential for green and go up for many of those keywords. So then you'll automatically be able to target new topics. And because you would have not added them to your strategy, you can always go back and add them to your strategy. So right now, like let's say if I wanted to add that to my strategy, I would have now added that to my strategy, and it kind of creates a brief that you can start executing content upon and start tracking. So you will see that you have targeted the keyword. So AI content brief, we rank at 15th position. So let's just sort this through. And you can see that I've targeted many keywords over here, which is not nearly enough, right? And I'm ranking for many of these terms at some positions by not even targeting it. So what it's suggesting is that I should start looking here and target some of these terms first, in terms of like some of these individual pages, talk about some of these things, and then focus on optimizing this particular cluster. So that's the whole objective behind it. And if I had added this to my strategy, you will see it should show up eventually here. Okay, you can see that I added that to my strategy, and now you have two ways you can take this content and execute upon it. You can either create a new document and write a whole new content around it, or if you choose that, hey, this keyword is very close to what this page is talking about, and this is the page, right? Like its home page. And if you want to really optimize that homepage, then you can just click on track and it will be add to your actions. This is not mandatory again, right? Like I understand that some of you might not have access to actions. So this is not mandatory, but it only helps websites, right, with some amount of traffic. Like if you've only written like 30, 40, 50 blog posts, actions is not really for you, right? Like it's for a little larger sites who want to compound upon what's already working. So for smaller sites, you're still figuring out like what's working for you. So I wouldn't really advise you start here. You start with a very solid strategy, make sure all of your content is super optimized, and you take inspiration from this process and come up with something that will make sense to you to execute upon. So okay, now this integrates with your search console data as well, right, to actually your actions project. So you can see that data here as well, and you can do some powerful sorting that you can still do in actions. And it's the same data, same information here to easily kind of help you adapt to the situation and create the strategy. And then yeah, so that's it with the strategist. I will quickly show one more major enhancements that we made to the dashboard, and which can go unnoticed. Is if you there's a cogswheel icon now, and if you click on it, you can actually decide what things you want to see, what you don't want to see, type of URL, like increase, decrease it, right? You can sort it by folders, you can sort it by files, and this the setting automatically saves that in your cache, so the next time you come, you will see the same thing, and you can keep reusing it. So the dashboard is a little customizable now than before. And I will stop right there.
Awesome. We do have a lot of people pretty excited, and they're like, is this something that is available? There are a bunch of questions, Pankil, so we'll go through them one by one fairly quickly. How do we integrate Google Search Console?
So your Google, you can integrate Google Search Console if you have some data, right? You would need Actions access. It's because it's a whole set of new utilities. What Actions is really about, and those of you really missed. So this was launched like 2 releases ago, and people are just trying to like. There's many people who are realizing that it just happened now, but it did not. Like it happened 2 releases ago. So what Actions is, that can tap into your Search Console data and then map it with volume, CPC, all that other things to kind of really understand what's going on and give you an optimization track, right? So you can then pick and choose which keywords you want to optimize, and you can go from it. So it's a separate utility that you would need to connect to in order to enrich your data in Strategist. If you don't have that, then you can, or if you don't want access to Actions, or your website is small, you can use your sitemap to do the same thing. It won't be as accurate or as convincing as obviously your Search Console data, but it will get you some places, somewhere along the line. If your website is new and you're still trying to build that up, if you want Actions, and it depends on the plan really, because it's a huge added expense, right? So we had to expense it out, or we couldn't support that kind of product in our platform. So that there is an add-on, and it's $69. You can either purchase that, or you can use sitemap to use Strategist, or you can even use it without either of those things and keep using them. But it consumes credits, right? So be mindful of how many clusters you explore, because it can reduce your search credits. And I think you have 500 search credits, or depending on the plan size. Like these are expensive ones. Like it's checking tons and tons of data to come up with the relevant information. So each exploration, consumes one search credit. And depending on your account size, just make sure you have enough capacity. So don't go nuts on it. You need to strategically execute, so stay focused and only explore clusters which are part of your strategy and that you are going to be working on this month or this week, right? Like you need to grow into this and not just start looking at 1,000 things and not getting anywhere, right? So start granular approach, go after things that would really matter to you right now, build that part of the topic cluster, and you can have multiple topics in cluster that you can target to, right? So you'd have plenty of content that you can write that would be strategically executed to meet your objective over a period of time.
Deb is asking, explain which numbers make the best for selection, like those numbers that you see when you were choosing which keyword to go with.
Okay, so what we are suggesting is, let's go here, and there could be some irrelevant data. So let's go first look at this, right? So this is where I would first start with. And I would start looking at this data and see a common trend. So this content and SEO space is a new entry for us. If you see SERP analysis, this coverage would look totally different because we have tons of content on SERP analysis, and people also ask, or SEO content to be specific, but the coverage is talking about content brief. So whether I have the strength to withstand some of the things or not is what I really want to explore. So I'm ranking for SEO brief in 92 position, right? Like that could totally make sense for me to write content around. And it is recommended that easy to rank based on AI predictions, right? So I would go after this and add this to my list, right? And make sure that I optimize around this content. Since I already have content around it, now I would go to my document and see, okay, I have which URL, right? Like it's my homepage. That's not where I really want it to be. So I would either create a new page, or if I have SEO content brief page, which is core to it, I would try and optimize that to meet this intent. But then that would mean that I'm tracking it with actions or creating a new content piece. So I would essentially go after keywords that are easy for me to rank to start with. And if you don't get that either rank for, if you don't really have if you have more specific preference, then you can also go after keywords which some other keywords in it that doesn't contain certain things, but you want to go after essentially everything that you can actually rank for right now, right? Like if you can't rank for certain things, don't go after it. So even the CPC, and this is 0 0, it's telling me that I have a fair chance to rank for this with new content if I was optimizing it in the right way based on my current perceived authority, which is AI content and tool space, right? Like we write tons of content. So it predicted that I could easily rank in this particular space and send traffic or connections to content brief and sort of create that linking process and topical authority internal linking structure.
How do you get from strategist project to content brief?
Okay, so if you go to Search Console data, right, and you would have your documents, like if you create this, it would create it and it would create it. Like, so go to document, there we go.
Can you connect the competitor's sitemap?
If you have the sitemap, yes, absolutely you can.
Does it mean that without actions we cannot use strategist effectively?
You can use it if your sites are smaller, and you can use it if your sites are bigger, if you're creating the strategy around this with some figuring out left on your own part, right? If you have actions, then this becomes much easier by spotting this green lights and understanding exactly what keywords to execute in order to build this. Let's go to actions, and I'll quickly show you why this is an add-on, right? It's not just Search Console data that we bring and show you. So even that is costly, and you can check that. But it's the mapping of volume, CPC, position, CTR, position, your competition, right? Like all of that combined in together. And when you track those keywords, you are tracking their position every 3 days to understand what their positions are in SERP and how you can actively make improvements on them. This is data that we did not have before. It's an added cost, and it's an ongoing cost every 3 days because this calculates it, right? So the use case is for some larger websites which have sufficient amount of information to kind of do this kind of analysis. And if you are there yet, right, like then this would make sense to you to buy into that 69. But if you're not there yet, you can totally skip this, and you should have no problem building out your strategy and doing everything with the strategy. So it's enrichment. We're talking about features and enrichment, right? Like this is data, that is the feature. And in order to make sense of one or the other, you can either use it together or you can use it separately.
With a new website, would it make sense to first target blogs with the low volume keywords around a topic and then build pillar pages?
Yeah, so I would try to circle out one cluster first. So when I am creating content creation process, right? Like if this is the content, like this is the content that I'm trying to target, and this is not a complete research, right? I just pulled out two topics for my sake right now. But if I'm creating content around content creation process, I want to master that space first, right? Then I would do everything to circle out this topics first before I move on to the next one. Then I can eventually come and add more topics as I build my authority. So what I would start with is low hanging fruits here first. Create a pillar page, create pages for whatever it's supporting. If you don't really have one and you just have one topic that you can create for everything, just create one. That's okay. And you can move on to the next one. But many times, and I would say like 80 to 70 to 80% of the time, you are going to have multiple content pieces that you can create under one of the subtopics. So what I would do is identify the ones that you can rank for right now, create those content pieces, create a pillar page, create a silo, like create an internal linking structure for that. Move on to the next step, move on to the next step, then move on to the next step, right? And keep creating that. And there's another thing that you do with internal linkings to link all of these together, which we'll explain in future webinars. But this should be your ideal process if you're a very new site. And even if you're a mature site, you want to do what's in your capabilities right now, right? Like if I can do something in 1 minute and get 30-40% of the way, then doing the same task in 10 hours and maybe not even getting to 60%, then where is your energy best spent, right? That's a process that we want every website to take, right? That you go after things that would make sense to you right now, will add to your topical authority, you can rank like easily for it, and then compound upon that effect to target more difficult terms, more broader terms in the same space, and keep building on that authority.
How do you decide if you should write a standalone article about a keyword and when to cluster multiple into one page?
Question: standalone article about a keyword and when cluster multiple into a page one, when clustering what on-page SEO signals are must have for those keywords. So all right, so when you're clustering this, right, so there's a couple of ways you can do this. And if you were clustering, well, if you were targeting the same blog post with multiple keywords, then I would either create multi keyword document in Outranking. But the best part is that when you are targeting a particular keyword, and outranking only gives you one keyword to start with, right? So focus the one that is the broadest of your entire collection at the moment. And when you do that, the data that will come out, there are two possibilities. It either will have all the semantically related terms that you might be wanting to target here, and if you have chosen like totally unique concepts, then you can go and add an additional multi keyword analysis to a document. And I can show that really quickly. Let's pick a topic which is sort of already written. So SEO content strategy, I could load that document, and you can add multi keywords in it to target more than one topic at a time. But I would, strongly urge you not to do this many times unless you really know what you're doing with this, because it can lead to you optimizing for intents which might not align, and there could be plenty of problems in both the keywords not ranking. But you can add another keyword here and search for it, and it will add it here. So you can then switch it between to find different data, then score the content for different keywords while keeping one document.
Mark is asking about the using strategist for e-commerce websites.
Yes, so you can use it, and that's going to be one of more advanced later use cases. But the way I would approach this is for an e-commerce company, for a niche e-commerce company, right? You can take the similar process that we've suggested. The only bifurcation I would do is in terms of categories and links, right? Like after this pages are created, and what kind of pages you'll be creating, right? So it might not make sense to create blog posts around everything, and you're targeting a product page around it or category page around it. So you have to do some manual figuring out of putting that linking structure in place and kind of categorizing further your content than what the document screen over here already provides. But yes, absolutely, you can still use the same approach to get to it with a few tweaks.
Mark is saying outranking is getting very thorough but complex.
What can be outsourced to writers? What must be done by me? It really depends which piece of the puzzle you play in the entire content strategy, right? Whether you're building the strategy, if you're building the strategy, then you can be the centerpiece and then forward the information that's generated in the briefs to the writers to kind of let them finish it out. If you are a solopreneur, right, like you want to do the entire process yourself, probably outsource editing or some of that other parts that you don't have time to take care of. It really depends on your objective. And yes, right, like it's a platform. And who would have thought that keyword research now is thought of it as so easy, right? But if you see the controls and the data and everything else to an 8-year-old is what it would look like to anyone who's 30 years old but doesn't know anything about SEO. So it is complex, and you are going to have to learn it. But this is the new way if you want to do things more efficiently, faster, with better data, and really dominate the niche in the best possible way, right? Like so it really depends on the objective and how much time versus money, right? Like it's associated with the amount of time that you spend. So it really depends on that. But it's a strategy platform, and it does a lot of this capability. So it's going to be complex, and we will be talking about many of those things opposed to a keyword clustering tool that just does keyword clustering. And so all they can talk about is keyword clustering. But we're talking about the life cycle. And when you're talking about life cycle, there are many things that come into picture to create a successful online business or an online website that will do anything for you, right? And you can be the strategist, you can be the writer, and you can be the optimizer if you have outranking. And that's I think the true nature of content strategy. So I think the platform is a lot capable, and because it's capable, it's a little complex. So it requires learning.
Tim is asking, why is Search Console not part of the existing user?
Because it's different kinds of user or different kind of. Would it be fair if for tracking one keyword I deduct 10 documents out of your limits? It wouldn't be, right? It's not consuming same kinds of credit. It's not consuming NLP kinds of credit. So it's like, also consider this. When we launched on AppSumo, we didn't even have NLP. We added NLP. That's an added cost. We pass it on, right? Like we want to make things as precise and as easy and achieve for everyone that's possible. But there are certain things that we can do and certain things we cannot do, because the data, the understanding of everything that goes behind supporting that piece of hardware is totally different. It's an added cost to us. So the decision is whether we enrich the platform, bring new capabilities, or not bring them at all, because it's not going to be feasible to some set of users, right? So this is the path which we take, right? Like it's an added benefit.
If you want to build a category and you already have 10 articles in this category, where would you start to grow the category? With actions or with strategist?
With strategist. Well, you'd need actions too if you want to accurately pinpoint it, but you can still get by it if your site is just not there yet, and you still have a sitemap that you can use to enrich the data that strategist is suggesting. So use some form of enrichment. The more you have, but some will also do. So it really depends. But the starting point would be strategist, right? Like actions is just creating a project and extracting data. You don't even have to get started with actions yet, but it's that data that enriches the strategist. So you'd start with strategist, and you can either connect the actions later if you like, after 5 months if you wanted to, or you can start with it. It really depends up to you, but you'd start with strategist and identifying the gaps and information that can help you increase your exposure in that category. So a coverage, right? Like we call that coverage in that particular category.
All
Sounds
right.
good.
Awesome, everyone. Thank you so much. And any questions, email Sapan, support at Outranking, join the Facebook group. And if you have anything to share, like you have a case study or any successes of your work, would love to showcase it on the website. Reach out to me, Natalie at Outranking, and I would love to chat with you.
We'll see you in the group or just creating content alongside. So have a
Awesome.
good one.
Bye.